Oh, Christina, are we good to go?
Waiting for Stan to give the go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to October 3rd's Hartford Board of Education workshop meeting. Um, per state mandates, the agenda for this workshop has been posted. Um, with that being said, Superintendent, I'll turn it over to you and your team to guide us through tonight's discussion.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. Good evening, board. Good evening to our community members who might be joining us. Thank you, Ms. Santiago, for um, following through with the presentation here. So tonight we are actually going to have Dr. Tiffany Curtis, along with some of her team members, that will focus on the work that has been accomplished this past year in efforts to attract, hire, and retain and support our highly effective educators across our district. I'll first acknowledge that there's going to be a lot of information that is going to be shared, but we know that this is a priority within our strategic plan, and we want to make sure that there's a deeper dive into the work as we're committed to continue to improve our efforts in making sure that students have access to high quality teaching and learning across all schools. So if we can go to the next slide. And before I dive into the introduction, just for protocol purposes, Chairman Ruger, there are these three sections. And so either we can go through the entire presentation and then, have questions at the end, or there are good breaks in between that we can pause to see if there are any questions. So I just want to check in with you for just process.
Let's try the latter, where you believe there's good breaks. Let's pause, and we could then continue. I'm looking at Ms. Brody posed a question regarding the presentation. I believe, Ms. Brody, the presentation was emailed, and then in terms of board docs, I think Christina usually posts information after our meetings.
That is correct. And in fact, I will post it during this meeting right now.
Okay, Superintendent.
Yes, so again, tonight's workshop is a deeper dive into the 2023-24 hiring season. We'll highlight the key moves made through strategic funding and partnerships. And then I'll tag in Dr. Curtis, who is going to have a detailed review of not only the internal, but the external initiatives specifically designed to increase our talent pool, as well as some of the impact from those efforts. And then we'll end with areas of growth and how the Office of Talent Management is thinking about next steps, specifically as it relates to the next hiring season. So again, let's just go to the next slide so that we can anchor the presentation. And this is a familiar slide here. It is a reminder for our community, especially as we approach the end of COVID relief funding. I wanted to express that we were very intentional about the opportunity that we had, right, with the additional COVID relief funds, and wanted to ensure that the funds and the allocations align to the district model of excellence priorities, rather than the work and the priorities seen as separate work or initiatives. So again, we engaged and got input from stakeholders, and we reflected on research, best practice, and recommendations from you as the board, and developed the design principles for how we should invest the resources. There were, if you remember, I think there were 5 or 6 key design principles. There are 2 principles that I believe tonight really anchor in, and that is there was a principle about being very deliberate in terms of the investing in equity, which we know is a priority for the board and for our community, and then making sure that the investments were done in a way that allowed us to plan with an eye toward the future, because we knew that we were all responsible for creating a highly successful and sustainable system once those funds sunset. So again, a reminder here, these were the must wins. And specifically, a lot of the information tonight is going to focus in that green quadrant in terms of the sustainable teacher pipeline and the supports for our some of our educators. So when we planned our ESSER application and must-win areas, we knew that hiring, supporting, and retaining high-quality talent would be a crucial component of that academic recovery and acceleration. We also know that we continue to operate within a highly competitive labor market for educators due to supply not keeping up, right, with the increased demand. We knew these trends were true pre-pandemic, and we certainly know that the pandemic disrupted all labor markets, but it is felt at a more deeper level in urban education. So in the strategic use of the ESSER funds, we invested millions of dollars in our talent initiatives, including adding capacity to our OTM, Office of Talent Management, office to increase not just recruitment, but also staffing teams. This allowed us to broaden our outreach in search of the most qualified teaching and staff candidates, also to expedite the hiring process and create a more efficient onboarding timeline. Throughout the referral and sign-on bonuses, we were able to recognize current staff and also attract new teachers to the district. And our robust marketing campaign generated awareness of Hartford Public Schools as an attractive place to work, and then helped to influence action, right, as potential candidates kind of navigated from digital ads to digital applications. And you'll see strategic investments in our grow our own, including work within our relay program and in maintaining our student teachers within the district. And then later on in the presentation, you'll see more details on specifically how the initiatives have impacted our hiring and retention success. And so that was a grounding. I know that Dr. Curtis, I'm going to now turn it over to you, and then we'll pause in between for some questions.
Thank you, Superintendent. Good evening. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to share the good work that is coming out of the Office of Talent Management. In the past 2 years, OTM has had a laser-like focus on adopting user-friendly processes, reorganizing the department to become more nimble and responsive to hiring managers and employees, and most importantly, codifying systems for efficiency, accountability, and overall HR best practices. Tonight, we will look at data that demonstrates how OTM has removed the big rocks and is listing practices that are sustainable and results-driven. For example, this slide indicates the number of certified applicants for this past hiring season. This year, we opened the hiring pool in December, which was 1 month earlier than previous years. Because of this minor shift, we were able to increase the applicant pool from 783 applicants to 1,067 during this hiring season. Subsequently, we were able to tap into our higher quality applicant pool earlier in the hiring season. The highest peak for applications was in May this year, as opposed to August of last year. And 131 teachers were hired between March and May, which was about 31% of our new hires. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. Through August 18th, we hired 446 educators. 275 of these hires were classroom teachers. With access to a more qualified applicant pool earlier in the season, we were able to start the school year with 15 schools fully staffed with teachers. Additionally, as compared to the state, HPS continues to employ a more diverse teaching staff, with 32% of our new hires identifying as educators of color. We can go to the next slide. So, since the first day of school, although we started this school year in a much better staffing position than last year, we still have vacancies. Therefore, the efforts of OTM continue throughout the school year, well beyond the opening of school. As of September 27th, the classroom vacancy rate was 8.9%, with 49 classroom vacancies. This is down from 75 classroom vacancies at the same time this time last year. Additionally, 38 schools have 2 or less classroom vacancies, and 4 schools have between 3 to 4 classroom vacancies. Also, since September 27, we have processed 112 recommendations from principals, and 100 new employees have attended an onboarding session facilitated by OTM. So this just shows how the efforts and the energy continue to persist well beyond the first day of school. Next slide, please. Branding and marketing, as the superintendent mentioned in her opening, was a huge function of the work in OTM the past 2 hiring seasons. It was critical to increase the awareness of the community and job seekers in considering HPS as a potential employer and to better understand all the employee benefits offered by the district. Our recent marketing campaign was by far our most successful. The paid media campaign generated over 8 million impressions between April and June. This means that our ad was seen 8 million times. These impressions drove 33,000 visits to our campaign landing page. Social advertising was our most effective strategy, and advertising on billboards and buses was just as effective. Search engine marketing also increased traffic to Nimble, which is our applicant tracking system, by 10%. And even though our marketing campaign, our paid campaign is over, you may still see buses rolling around the streets of Hartford with our marketing campaign on the side of them, and they will remain there until those buses get rewrapped. So that was a really good source of our funds. We can go to the next. Now let's take a look at our pipeline program. We continue to partner with Relay Graduate School of Education, which is an accelerated part-time teaching residency program designed for non-certified staff members to earn certification while continuing to work in their schools. There are currently 13 participants in the program, and overall 67% of the participants in this program have been paraeducators. In partnership with schools of education like UConn, UHart, Central, and Eastern, just to name a few, we have placed 77 future teachers in our classrooms who will be completing their pre-service to meet their practicum requirements. These placements offer leadership and growth opportunities to our own staff members who host these 77 future teachers, as well as provide our schools opportunities to attract and retain their hosted candidates. So if these 77 potential teachers have really great experiences partnering with our classroom teachers in our schools, that means it's easier for us to convert them into HPS employees. Additionally, tuition reimbursement is also a viable option for our current employees, both certified and non-certified, to upskill their credentials through degree-seeking programs and job-aligned learning opportunities. Last year, 167 employees took advantage of tuition reimbursement. Next slide. As a final slide for the deep dive into the hiring data, these are the hard to fill positions that continue to be a focus of recruitment and hiring. I'm happy to report that this time last year, we had 34 elementary vacancies, and this number has decreased significantly. However, special education, science, math, and paraeducator roles continue to have high vacancy rates. It's important to note that compared to last year, we have decreased our overall vacancies in every hard to fill area except tech ed and world languages. Next slide. So after digging into the data, we're going to spend a few minutes looking at the current recruitment and retention strategies that are the current focus of the work in OTM.
Can we pause there just to see if there's any questions?
Sorry.
I'm not seeing any raised hands, so I think we could continue.
Thank you. Also, in Caribbean Connections yielded 24 highly qualified, culturally competent educators, which we believe is a huge success. We will continue to lift the resources necessary to ensure these educators are successful this school year and beyond, and we'll also iterate on this hiring practice to make sure that we can leverage this strategy in continuing to diversify our talent pool. For our recruitment schedule, we continue to execute a robust recruitment calendar. These pictures you see here are pictures of our recruitment team out and about, making connections and sourcing talent. These activities allow us to continue to strengthen our relationship with university partners who we believe serve as great support partners in helping to identify best fit candidates for HPS. Next slide. We're going to dig into a little bit into our pipeline partnership with the Relay Graduate School of Education. Again, this is an alternative route to certification and residency program. And it's a proven tool to mitigate barriers to entry for historically excluded communities. Through our years of partnership, we know the residency model alone is not enough to clear the hurdles created by decades of institutionalized racism. HPS strives to improve access to residency programs by actively reducing the costs associated with participation and preventing the loss of wages and benefits. HPS hopes to work with CSDE to advocate for more equitable admission practices, which consider a wider array of lived experiences and knowledge base. Our partnership with Relay Graduate School of Education is a strong marketing and retention tool. Prospective candidates and current staff members can be confident in HPS's commitment to staff growth and development. And again, of the 36 participants who have enrolled in Relay, 24 of them were paraeducators. But it's important to note that although our current results yield 80% of our folks who have completed the program are still teaching in our district, there are still some challenges. Some of the challenges, folks apply to the program, but they can't get in. Unfortunately, we don't determine if an applicant gets into the program or not. There are some state requirements like the mandated GPA. We found that 8 applicants to the Relay program were excluded by their GPA alone. 8 applications were incomplete, and then Two folks wanted to be in the program, but they had residual balances, so they couldn't participate because of financial challenges. So some of the ways that we're thinking about increasing eligibility so that we can get more people into the relay program is working with the state to identify alternatives to undergraduate GPAs as an admission requirement. Like if they didn't meet the GPA, what are other things that we can look at that could quite possibly allow them to qualify for this opportunity? And then thinking about marketing to recent college graduates as a way to lure them into our district, into this alternative route to licensure, and then getting them to make a commitment, a long-term commitment to the district because we supported their professional practice on the front end. So really trying to figure out ways to better leverage this pipeline so that we can maximize the number of participants given some of the challenges that exist. Next slide. We also have pipelines for non-certified roles. So some of our ongoing strategies, our recruitment team targets the community. We go to events, hiring events, fairs, anything that we can think of that has the demographic of the employee that we would want here in Hartford. We tap into those events. We partner with community organizations to provide resume review. So we want to be an asset to the community in support of them moving into the job market. I hope that you can see our lawn signs all over the community. We ask people to help advertise that we have these opportunities in the district as a way to get people thinking about, like, this could be a career for me. I may not have ever thought about being a teacher, and maybe I don't have to enter the system as a teacher. I can enter the system in so many different roles. So just trying to tap into that space and get people to think about, like, yeah, I could have a career in Hartford. And then, of course, we've contracted with ESS to help provide substitute teachers and para-educators in a cohort of 11 schools that we know have high teacher vacancy rates over the course of the school year. So that partnership will help us fill those gaps. We also, for our para-educators, not only have Relay, but we also collaborated with union leadership to execute an MOU, which kind of relaxed some of the requirements for para-educators entering the district. So that was a great partnership between OTM and the para union, and that has yielded a few applicants and a few employees in the district. And for substitute teachers, we also entered into an MOU with the substitute teachers to increase the daily sub rate to help us attract and be more competitive to get more substitute teachers into the district. It continues to be a challenge staffing both peer educators and substitute teachers, which is why we continue to try to find partnerships and ways to help support filling those gaps, because we do believe those are two very, very critical roles in the district that we're hyper focused on this year. Next slide. So some of our retention strategies that are our current focus, the intent to return survey, and I'm going to talk about the data from that a little later on, but the intent to return survey has great predictive value in terms of being able to better understand our hiring needs earlier on in the season. This year also, OTM will work with school and district departments to better understand their attrition and retention data. We'll work with school leaders to craft hiring practices that better meet the needs of their individual hiring needs. We were pretty successful this year in partnering with Capital Prep in that way because they start the school year much earlier, so their hiring season is a lot earlier also. So we were able to partner with Capital Prep specifically around the roles, the needs, the profile of their school, the type of educator that best fits their theme. And we were highly successful in getting that school staff along with the hiring managers there. Of course, the principal and the AP did an awesome job also. But in that partnership, we were able to look at their data from the previous year and really design a response to their school that made sure that they were able to open the school with staffed classrooms. And finally, a focus on stay conversations between hiring managers and staff early on in the school year will help to better understand how to support, grow, and retain staff members at every level of the organization. So these are three things that we're focused on this year in OTM. And I'll pause, Superintendent.
Just checking.
Looking at, yep, seeing if there's any questions. I do have one question. I know you mentioned that with the licensing, there were some teachers, I forget the number, but financially they couldn't afford it. Is there anything that as a district we could do in leveraging the ESSER funds, or is that kind of out of scope?
So we do support participants in the Relay program when they're in. We subsidize that program for them, which is a huge benefit to the participants. Unfortunately, if someone has an outstanding balance to an institution, like they owe a school money, we can't pay a debt.
Okay, so the financial constraints that you're talking about is a past debt. It's not necessarily okay.
Correct. Because we remove the financial barrier when they get into the program.
Got it. See if there's any questions from my colleagues. I do not see any raised hands, so I think we can continue.
Thank you. So we've looked at our data and we've discussed our current focus. Now I want to briefly touch on how OTM is sustaining best hiring practices this year and into the future. So here are some of the things that OTM has done and will continue to do. Through our partnership with Adams and Knight, we built a portfolio of marketing materials to brand the district recruitment campaign. We will continue to use those pieces of materials throughout our hiring seasons. We've developed and implemented a robust in-person onboarding experience for all new hires. COVID really isolated the onboarding process and moved it online. So we didn't have contact with our new hires up front. So we've reframed that entire experience and we bring people into the district and we try to give them a great first experience and impression of the district through the onboarding process. That's been pretty successful. We've established monthly meetings with HR generalists and principals. That means that no principal has to go very long with wondering like what's going on with my talent and hiring and vacancies and openings. Every month they have a meeting with their HR generalist to go through an agenda of items that highlight the ways in which OTM is there to support them and keep their school staffed. And not just staffing, right? In OTM, we have all kind of other things, benefits and labor, anything that the employee could need. We want to make sure that they can reach out to their HR generalist. We've administered the annual intent to return survey. This was our second year. We'll do it again this year. And we've had a 63.4 response rate, which was a huge increase from the year before. And of course, we got great data from that. We provide principals and hiring managers with trainings and toolkits to help support their hiring practices and to have real tangible, real-time resources at their fingertips. And then what we're super proud of this year is that we kind of put a stake in the ground around a date. And we said, as of August 11th, any employee that was recommended by August 11th will be fully onboarded and made whole by the first pay period of this school year, meaning that there were no employees that should not have had that were lacking in anything. So they had their technology, their badges, they were just really ready to show up and only think about the role that they were hired to do in the school. So that we were very successful in that way. And we'll continue those practices as well. Next slide. And now here's our intent to return survey. We're super excited about this. This was an outcome of the work that we did with TNTP year one. And year one, we kind of stumbled our way through the intent to return survey. We worked with HFT to kind of clarify some of the questions and what the meaning was. And we got through year one. Year two, it was awesome. We had a higher response rate. And what we found that overall, 85% of those the teachers, 975 teachers responded to the survey, which was about 63% of HFT. 85% said they intended to return in their current position. 3.6% were interested in applying for other roles in the district. Well, what's interesting is that 7.8% or 71 respondents of those who took the survey were considering resignation at the end of the school year. And so this data aligns really closely with the actual resignations that were realized by the district. So this data is very predictive in terms of preparing us for our hiring season and understanding our talent landscape here in the district. We also saw that reasons for considering resignation, we wanted to highlight one answer that said, I saw limited opportunities for development or advancement. 25% of respondents indicated this answer. And so in OTM for us, this is an indication of this is a place that we can be leaning into. So we get this data, what are we going to do with it? We see that employees or staff members, particularly in this case, teachers, want to know how they can develop and advance in the district. So that's something that we have to make very clear to teachers, and that will be a focus of OTM as well. Next slide. And this is how the intent to return survey kind of aligned with our actual data. So here's the attrition data for the past 4 years for resignations and retirements. And what we found was that the results from the intent to return survey are statistically significant and therefore generalizable to the entirety of HFT, which just means we got enough respondents that we can use this data to layer it across the entire membership of HFT. And so between April 1st and August 22nd of this year, 130 HFT members resigned, which was about 8.4% of the members who were invited to take the survey, meaning all of HFT, which was really close to the data that we got back from the intent to return survey data. And then 27 HFT members submitted their retirement, and this was within 7% of the predicted value. So we got very, very close to better understanding the data related to vacancies and how we should prepare to respond, recruit, and staff. And finally, we want to talk about exit results. While our exit, this will be the last slide. Thank you. While exit surveys is a super sustainable practice that we are looking to improve, we want to acknowledge that historically our exit survey rate response rates have been super low. And so in OTM, what we have come to understand is that we have to better streamline the separation process for better accessibility. Meaning when people are ready to retire or are thinking about resigning, they are trying to figure out how to do it. How do I resign? Who do I contact? What do I fill out? What do I submit? So clearly there is a lot of clarity that could be added to that process. And as we clean up that process and make it clear how individuals can access the separation process, we'll better embed the exit survey option for employees as well. But so because our response rate is only 15%, conclusions drawn from the exit surveys are not generalizable. So we can't really say this is how most people are feeling when they're separating from the district. So of 213 individuals that were invited to participate in the exit survey, only 33 responded. So a couple of things: understanding how to better streamline the process to make it more accessible, and then trying to figure out how to get individuals to engage in that process as well. What we found from the intent to return survey is our first year we did it, people were very skeptical and they didn't want to participate. The next year, we had a much better participation rate because of some tweaks we made in the accessibility and communicating out the survey. We'll do the same thing around exit survey participation to increase participation so that we can get data that helps us better understand why people are separating from the district and how we can get in front of those separations. Even if we can't prevent a separation, we can separate on great terms, right? And I'm not saying separations aren't on great terms. We just know that we have our fingerprint on onboarding. We know what that experience is like. We also want to be on the other end of the life cycle of talent. We want to have our fingerprint on separations as well, so that process can be as supportive and beneficial as possible with our employees who are leaving the district. And that is all that I have.
Thank you, Chief Curtis. And kudos to your team. You have done quite a bit. But as you noted, there's still more to do. With that being said, I do see a hand from Board Member Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief Curtis, thanks for the presentation. I've held a couple of questions. One is about the relay program. I'm glad you provided the data about the folks who didn't get in the program. To me, the situation that I've heard of, I think was disappointing. We lost someone who could be a teacher, and now that they're a para, right? And what I would recommend, I know you work with the state to try to get them to look at those requirements. That GPA requirement, to me, doesn't make a lot of sense when people come with experiences and other teaching background and other educational experiences, because that 2.7 to me makes sense as an indicator of success if you're just coming off the street, out of college, no real teaching experience. But it becomes problematic when people come with teaching experience and yet they're still stymied by that requirement. So that being said, I'm going to ask that you really seek from the state to allow districts to have waivers. I think what would have helped in this situation is you as a district having some ability to have a waiver for some candidates where you can see better than the state rule. And I would ask you to add that, ask to the state, in addition to ask them to loosen their requirements. I think you, Chief Curtis, probably would have waived in at least 2 or 3 of those candidates just based on what you probably heard and saw from the would you agree?
I would agree. And I would also like to note that we have tried to figure out ways to increase an applicant's GPA before they apply. So like you get denied and we're like, oh, let's just take a few classes to increase your GPA and then you reapply. but they don't allow for that either. So we're just kind of, I don't want to say we're fumbling our way forward, but we're just like throwing everything at the wall. We're also meeting with our university partners who have a lot of insight into alternative routes to licensure. So they're helping us also to craft our message to the state around how we want to approach this challenge.
Okay. If I may ask another question, a question, comment.
Yep.
Chief Curtis, I think this focus on recruitment was good. At the very end of you talked about retention, which is one I've been wanting to land on. The one complaint that I've heard has been response time from your office, or what's broadly considered HR. I don't know if all HR is under OTM, but let's just say it may be. I would really encourage you to really look at that in the sense of you talked about some real targeted goals for getting new recruits first day ready. And I think that's a success, because I remember there was a year, I think last year or something, where teachers were starting the first day of school without their computers being fully integrated and them ready to go into the classroom. Can you do something with response rate? I'm really wanting you to find a way, report back to us, every input that comes to your office, email, phone call, I don't care. Track it and then put some kind of time period on it. 2 days, 3 days, something where we can try to see some real data. And I'm saying that to help with the argument that we don't hear from the office. People all have stories of not getting response time. I think one response is your office starting to do some measurement of 90% of our calls get responded in 48 hours. Something. Give me something. Maybe 10% of them go beyond that. But let's actually start measuring it, because I don't think response time gets better if we don't really measure it. And the reason I'm saying that is that one thing that may help with retention is at least the perception that once they're hired here, that the same care that you gave them on that recruitment end kind of still maintained. And one way to actually measure that is to show that once you contact us, we respond to you within a certain amount of time. We escalate your situation within a certain amount of time. And if you could come up with a plan and report back to us how that's being put together and how that's progressing, that would be great. It's not even important to me that you do great the first day, but I'm convinced if we start tracking it, it's going to get better.
Dr. Curtis, I know you're going to respond. I just wanted to also say that from a more broader perspective, Board Member Walker, the work that we're starting to do at central office to examine some of the processes and the protocols will help us get to exactly what you're talking about. And we're starting to have those conversations with just key members at central office as well, in addition to others throughout the district, so that we can get at what are those specific experiences, because you're talking also about a customer service, an internal, right, customer team service perspective. And so based on the work that we're going to do, it is going to inform the metrics for each of the respective departments.
Okay. Thank you. And so again, this is less of a real criticism, more of let's start having some data so we can begin to say something to when people have these experiences. Thank you, Superintendent.
Thank you, Board Member Walker. I just have really 3 quick responses to this. For my team who was on this call, first day ready. That's our new tagline. So thank you. I love that, first day ready. Secondly, all HR functions, yes, belong in OTM, to answer that question. Yes, all things HR are in OTM. The last thing I want to say is last year we created something called the OTM portal, and it's designed to be super responsive to employees to get their needs met. and get a tremendous amount of questions answered and give them access to tools and documents and links that they could possibly need to make their job easier without having to speak with anyone. We've been trying really hard to drive folks to the portal, because so much of what they contact OTM for, and just district departments for in general, could be answered in the by accessing the OTM portal, and then agree with the superintendent that I'm sure after what she just discussed, kind of that process plays out, that we will definitely have a lot of data that indicates where the areas in which we can improve with customer service and response rate.
Thank you. Looking at the screen, seeing if there's any further questions from my colleagues. Board Member Oliver, Board Member Ledger. Board Member Ledger, I see your hands raised.
Yes, thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the presentation. One question that I have is with regards to the praxis. What are you seeing with regards to the success rate, and is the praxis, the certification test actually, is that something that is preventing folks from getting certified through the relay program? And how are you handling that? How are you preparing the students, not you per se, but what's the preparation piece with that?
Board Member Ledger, thank you so much for lifting that. I want to invite Nancy Williams into the conversation really quickly, because we just overcame a huge hurdle in the district regarding the praxis. So it is a barrier. We have folks on DSAPs. This particular situation, we had a few teachers who were going to lose their certification because their DSAPs were expiring and they couldn't pass the praxis. And Nancy worked very closely with our partners to get in. I want to back up a little bit, because our director of mathematics was in front of all of this. Mario was in front of all of this, the need that these teachers have. So we worked together. We reached out again to our university partners, and we created a partnership that would allow for extra support for these teachers. Nancy, if you just want to pop in for 2 quick seconds, because we were successful. We're having success, I could say.
Yeah, Relay has responded to that as they've evolved as a program, because we have had teachers previously who did have trouble passing praxis. And so we as a district provided praxis prep. We had our own teachers tutoring our staff, but Relay also provides that as part of the programming now. It's now everyone has to have that tutoring as part of the program in order for them to successfully complete the program. But we are also looking at, with a few individuals that we were assisting in the last couple of months, is also looking at not only our own internal staff for tutoring and utilizing Relay's resources, but even connecting with outside RESCs who lead this work in Connecticut, and not only in regards to preparing them for the praxis prep. Some folks have tried and have failed a few times, and so really also trying to frame the mindset so that way when they approach the test for, say, the second or third time, giving them some tools so that way they are their mindset is ready to engage in that exam, and to really make sure that their mindset is ready for the exam. So those are some of the things that we have been doing.
Thank you, Nancy.
Looking at the screen, seeing if there's any additional questions.
No questions from me. This is Kim Oliver.
Yeah. I guess just in general, so I know from a diversity perspective, we're better than the state. Can can you maybe just kind of paint a picture of what's happening nationally as it relates to um, recruitment efforts, particularly in the areas where we struggle? Has your team kind of done a comparison of, like, I think you mentioned language, right? Like, is that a trouble area across the country, or is it unique to Connecticut, is unique to urban? Well, I'm assuming it's not unique to urban districts, but I'm just trying to get a sense of where we have gaps, some type of comparative viewpoint.
For clarification, Board Member Rigger, are you asking about the diversity of our overall teaching force, like the lack
No,
of diversity?
no.
No.
So I recognize that we are diverse. What I'm saying is, even with that, right, and we've done a great job. There are certain areas where we still can improve. And I'm trying to get a baseline. How does that compare, like, with national trends or even regional trends? So, special education, right? Like, how is Hartford Public School tracking in relationship to maybe some national averages or some regional averages? You mentioned language. Like, how are we comparing in that sense?
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. And to answer your question, no, we haven't done that comparison with how we are performing in our hard to fill areas against, I guess, the state and other districts. I would like to say, though, we, in general, our positions, particularly our hard to fill positions, are consistent across the state, across districts. They're just positions that you need a lot of them, like special education teachers. You need a lot of them, or they're very specialized, like math teachers. Thank you for this slide. Like math teachers, right? You need a specific certification to teach in math or science. So we know that just in general, schools of education are just not seeing the level of participation in their programming where they're growing, developing, producing teachers. And so we just have a limited talent pool. So I think that this is where the alternative route to licensure program, this is where the grow your own, this is where you can be a BT or you could be a para and then you could become a math teacher. That's why it's so important to look internally at the staff that we have that have already committed to the district and that we could quite possibly help grow into these roles, because we know that nationally, they're just hard to staff and hard to fill.
Thank you.
Chairman Rigger, I will share that although it's not a national data point, and a few weeks ago I did have a conversation with other urban superintendents, and this was the topic of discussion. And so bilingual educators and teachers of English to speakers of other languages was a very prominent area. Those have been shortages, but I felt like in the conversation, everyone was expressing that they're feeling like out of sorts and not knowing what other creative ways they can get additional staff to serve, right, students that are new arrival students that need to learn English, or English is their second language, given, right, their diversity across many of the urban systems. I don't know, Dr. Curtis, if you've heard that recently, but it seemed like it was kind of elevated on the list in that last conversation that I had.
Okay. Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to touch back on the world languages, obviously, because it's near and dear to me. But two, I think we have an opportunity here in the district to have that be one of our strong suits. We We have a very diverse district, yet we seem to underinvest in world languages. So I'm going to elevate that up. And what I'm saying is, while you have Spanish speakers in this district, we don't have really rigorous programs in this district to really emphasize and grow literacy among Spanish speakers. There's a way in which Spanish speakers can get higher literacy in Spanish-speaking countries than they can get here. We could build a bench of bilingual teachers if we really built a bench of really literate bilingual speakers right here in the district. They're speaking it at home. Can we teach them really great bilingual education here in the district? I think there's an opportunity there to do it. I'm only tossing it out there. It's kind of beyond this topic, but Superintendent, as we're looking at reimagining education, what could Hartford really be? And I'm saying Hartford could really be a center for creating really great bilingual speakers and really literate bilingual students. Would you agree, or would you consider that, you or Chief Curtis?
I agree that we can continue to leverage the assets that our students and our families and our community brings. That's an asset.
Thank you. Seeing if there's any additional questions or comments from my colleagues. Okay, Superintendent, I'm not sure if there's anything else that you wanted to share with the group.
That concludes the presentation, and I'm sure that Dr. Curtis would agree that we remain committed in making sure that we double down the efforts on having highly qualified staff and educators in front of all of our students.
Awesome. All righty. Well, that concludes today's workshop. I appreciate everyone's engagement. And more importantly, Dr. Curtis, to you and your team, I appreciate the discretion and efforts that you've put forth. And I think I would be remiss if I didn't say continue the good work.
Thank you very much. I speak on behalf of my team when I say thank you. We appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, that concludes today's meeting. Everyone have a great night.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye-bye.